We go.
Middle school?
Well, one's in second and one's in fourth. They're still in, yeah.
All right, hey everybody, it's PennLive Opinion Editor John Misick. Welcome to our endorsement interview with the state, U.S. Rep. Scott Perry, old Rep. Scott Perry. We'll have you here for the next hour taking our questions and yours. Feel free to weigh in on the Facebook feed or on Twitter. We'll try to squeeze in as many as we can. Congressman, thanks for coming
Thank you.
in.
Yeah.
Usual drill, we can dive right into questions, or if you want to kind of offer sort of a preamble or opening statement, you're free to do that as well.
I think that most folks around the area are probably somewhat familiar with me, although the district's new, so you try and introduce yourself. Folks, I think oftentimes have an opinion of people that is not necessarily completely accurate and in depth, so I like to kind of let people know about my background because it seems a little untraditional. We grew up, my brother and I, and my sister's 12 years younger than I am, but we grew up in Dillsburg, and our house didn't, if you watched the last segment, didn't have any running water or electricity. We had an outhouse, and we, on a two-man saw, no chainsaw, to cut wood for the winter time, because it was going to be cold. And that's kind of, you learn the value of hard work and so on and so forth. Didn't have a great family life early on, so to speak. I mean, look, we're blessed. It's but a lot of arguing and so on and so forth. So I wanted to get out of the house somewhat early. So one of the reasons to start working when I was 13, picking fruit. I didn't have any skills, but I could show up on time with a good attitude, and that's what I did. I got through high school, and I kind of characterized it that way because I didn't have a lot of direction. My she's a proud, tough lady, working hard, multiple jobs, and raising her boys, and eventually my sister. But it was tough, so she wasn't around a lot because she was working. So. But joined the military. I started out at the bottom rung as a private. That's a long, long time ago. I'm still serving today as a brigadier general, so that's a pretty long climb. But I've been privileged to serve. Put myself through Penn State and Hack and Penn State. I was a VOTEC student in high school, so I can fix a car. Usually, in most cases, I can identify the problem. And started a business with a couple $1,000s, which is all we had in my mom's garage. My mom was the president of that business, and we worked that business for over 20 years. Ran for state rep. I didn't really plan on ever being in public life or as a representative, because I thought people had to be connected. You had to have money, and I was a guy with dirt underneath my fingernails because I was working a mechanical contractor job down in the ditch oftentimes, or working on my own vehicle to just get through. But as I got involved, I realized that I had as much to offer as anybody else. As America, you can realize your dreams. So I've lived the American dream in that regard. Had an opportunity to run for Congress. I was unexpecting of the opportunity. I had a lot going on, but spoke with my wife, spoke with my pastor. We made a decision, and I've been blessed and privileged to serve the people of the 4th District. And it's changed a little bit now with the 10th. And so we're going to try and earn their support and tell our story and see what's on their mind and what their concerns are, and be a representative in Washington, D.C. for them.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm sure we have a lot of different questions
Sure.
to ask you today, and this one may be one that you had from other people, but I'm not sure, and I'd be interested in the answer. And
Okay.
It is just this. President Trump, in my adult lifetime, seems to be, love him or hate him, he seems to be about the most controversial president that we've had. And I'm just curious, for you, as a sitting member of Congress, as a Pennsylvanian, when we approach 2020 as a Republican, are you locked into support for him as a second term, or would you like to see the Republican Party go in a different direction? Because I have a sense that there's more of a chance than usual that we'll see some serious challenges for a nomination this year.
I think.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a bit early, and I know that there's a lot of news been made about President Trump. Quite honestly, I think there was a lot of news made about President Obama as well, and I think it's kind of your perspective. I try and stay out of the drama, so to speak, as much as possible, even though I see it as much as anybody else. I see the rhetoric, I see the tweets and the and you know, the things that are written and so on and so forth. But for me, I really just try and stay focused on the policy. Are we moving in the right direction from a policy standpoint, generally speaking? Of course, that's economic. Charlie, you know me, that's always been a big issue for me. Debt and deficit spending and policy about how families are doing in the community, how our country's doing. And I'm a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, so how we are doing our place in the world and how other countries work with us and what our position is in relation to them. So I think it's a bit early. We got 2 more years to go, which is a long time, as you know, and I think I'll make my judgment call at that time based on really, I think, the facts and the factors that I've kind of outlined.
So you're not ready to declare 100% rock solid support for his re-election at this point?
I don't even know if he's running again, right? I mean, I just think that's one of those, anything can happen between now and then. I just, you know, so I've got issues in front of me right now that I'm focused on, and that's what I'm focused on.
So let's talk about that then. As a member
Sure.
of the Foreign Affairs Committee,
Yes, sir.
the President has angered the EU, he's angered Canada, he's angered other traditional American allies. I mean, to what extent does that complicate Congress's role in dealing with these?
Well, first of all, as a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, generally the heavy lifting, so to speak, or the real what's the word I'm searching for? The real responsibility in the legislature regarding foreign affairs in general resides in the Senate and the Foreign Relations Committee. So we have a lot of hearings, we get a lot of information, we inform a lot of folks by the questions we ask and the hearings we have. So in that sense, sometimes I'm frustrated because I wish we could do more, and I wish we would be more proactive, and I think that the House has kind of given short shrift in that whole thing because we got a lot of great people in the committee and we have a lot of great ideas. That having been said, I got to tell you, I kind of reject the premise that we've angered all our allies. If the only time that we can be friends is when I give you everything you want, which is good for you, it's not necessarily good for the citizens of my country, is that really a friendship? I mean, it's got to be a two-way street, and to me, to a certain extent, it's refreshing that the president, even though he might take a different tack than I would, that maybe not my style, but is saying, hey, look, you folks have obligations here. We're willing to help, and this is good for America too, but our taxpayers are paying the bill here, and you know, we demand some accountability on your end and some participation on your end for your country. And it seems like in the past, no president, Republican or Democrat, was willing to do any of that. So like I said, maybe the methodology isn't necessarily my style, but generally speaking, I like a lot of the results.
Okay. You mentioned something at the very top here in your introductory statement that, you know, I think because people know you as a rock-solid conservative, right? And you don't pull any punches about that. I mean, you are outspoken and you let people know where you stand. And you're a member of the Freedom Caucus, and you know,
which is mischaracterized and maligned, but that's another,
Yeah. So I think that you can be susceptible to people like putting you in a box.
Sure.
And characterizing you as a cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And so in that vein, I just wanted to ask you, to give you the opportunity, is there an issue, or what issue would you say is out there where you veer away the most from the traditional conservative position? Is there a position on issues that you've taken that we may not know about, where that might cause people to say, I didn't know that about that.
You know, I will tell you, I consider myself, you know, a traditional guy. I love my family, I love my country, and you know, and I fight for the things I believe in. And as a politician, I think it's important to stand for something and to let people know where you are, and take the punches and explain yourself. And people, even though they might not disagree, they can at least respect the fact that you're willing to stand for something. if you would have told me 6 years ago, and Charlie, we know each other since then, that I would be the leading advocate in the United States Congress as a Republican for a component of medical marijuana, as I said yesterday, I would have thought maybe you were smoking something, part of what we were talking about. But I listened to my constituents. I listened to their circumstances. We did our research, which is important, right? Because we got a lot of different folks coming in, and everybody's got a compelling story to tell, but it's important to get the facts correct. Once we delved into the facts, I went to my staff and I said, "Look, we're going to have to champion this issue. It's the right thing to do, and I know no one else is going to do it. Everybody else feels odd about it. It's not one of the things in our party that generally we stand for, but we have these medical refugees in our district that are taking their kids to Colorado for treatment. We got people that are running afoul of the law to treat their children. Like, what kind of federal government position is this that forces people to do that? We are on the wrong side of this. Somebody's got to take a stand, and it's going to be us." And look, I've got people walk up to me in a restaurant that say, and quite honestly, they're usually older folks that say, "That's a gateway drug. You're wrong-headed about this. This is the wrong idea to have." And respectfully, I understand kind of their mindset, but I don't think they fully understand the situation, and I don't think all my colleagues do either. We spend a lot of time trying to educate, inform them, and convince them that this is the right thing to do.
Any other examples like that?
Well, look, I'm an equal opportunity offender regarding too much spending. And, I'm characterized as, well, you complained about it during the last administration, but you don't say anything this administration. Just have everybody know I just voted no on the recent appropriations bill, which was a combination of several, which is something that I don't prefer, because I think we should do them individually so everybody can see, and spends more money than we have as usual, and we show no appetite whatsoever to rein in the pace of federal government spending on either side of the aisle, and that's not necessarily a very welcome position in Washington, D.C.
All right, I'm going to deal with some questions from readers/viewers on Facebook. Getting a number of questions about trade and tariffs.
Yeah.
Starting to see downstream effects here in Pennsylvania with farmers and growers. Do you support the president's approach philosophically, and how concerned are you about what's happening here at home?
I'm very concerned about it because, again, it affects people's livelihoods. They've got mortgages to pay and the kids to send to school and car payments just like everybody else. So every bit of it concerns me. I guess the circumstances why I don't even like tariffs, right, any more than I like taxes, because it ends up coming to the consumer. I pay more. We all pay more for the things that we buy, the things that we need in our homes and to live our lives, and I don't see that as a good thing. The question is how do you reset this trade imbalance with all these countries that have been taking advantage of the United States in general, Pennsylvania in particular? I drive around all the small towns that I have driven around for my whole life here. Dillsburg had a shoe factory, a dress factory, Red Line had cigar factories. All these little factories, all these little businesses across Pennsylvania and across the country, I imagine, have kind of over the last 40 years, many have gone by the wayside, and there's a reason for that. And I think the president is trying to reset the circumstances in America where we're producing things and where we're selling things and we're not outsourcing things to other countries, and we can make things, and there's not many vehicles to do that. We can sanction other countries, but what are we punishing them for? For doing what we allowed them to, and what we engaged with them in treaties or agreements. We can't punish them for making the best of the opportunity we've given them. Did we go to war with them? We certainly don't want to do that. That's not a reasonable option. So I don't like the tariffs, but what other options do we have? Because they're going to keep taking advantage of us as long as we let them. So the point is I just hope it goes quickly. I hope it goes quickly.
We've now seen a couple of multi-billion-dollar bailout packages for farmers, soybean farmers, for instance.
Right.
I mean, so you're a guy who's not a fan of government waste.
I'm not.
That's some perhaps long-term pain that's not going to help things.
Well, it's short-term pain, right? The tariff, and then subsidizing the farmers that are suffering the short-term pain is, again,
punishing them for our own policies.
punishing for our own policy, but short term. I think we have to look at other nations, and we have to look at our circumstance around the world. At some point, this has to stop. This taking advantage of America has to stop, or I'm not sure where it ends, right? We end up at parity with every other country in the world on an economic level, and that really diminishes our ability to do the things that we want to do in America and to be the America that we are. And so never is the right time to do it, but it has to be done at some point. And while it's uncomfortable and it's unpleasant, like I said, somebody has to have a longer view than just today. Somebody has to. And so while I don't like it, I don't see a better option.
Another question from a reader here. Does Representative Perry still believe that reproductive health services should be excluded from healthcare plans?
No, I've never believed that. And the federally qualified health centers, we provide reproductive services, and I voted for increasing that on multiple times. That's just a talking point, meant to engender and invoke an emotional response that is far from the facts.
Representative Perry, you have high ratings from both the NRA and the Gun Owners of America.
Mm-hmm.
You've made your position very clear as a defender of the Second Amendment, and you haven't wavered, not after Las Vegas, not after the Pulse shooting. I'm wondering if Parkland, in light of the fact that, as you mentioned earlier, you have two children in public schools, has it any of this sort of swayed you to maybe begin to rethink your position on gun rights and gun control?
So again, I'm about the facts and about solutions. I would just like every other family, we watch these things and we're horrified by them. My wife and I sit and talk, and we are just heartbroken. No one sends their child to school with the thought that they will never see them again, and no one wants to. No one wants any of that or any of this. But we have to be thoughtful people that say, well, what has changed? America per capita used to have more guns than it currently does. So is that the issue? And we have to struggle with this and balance with this oath that we took on the Constitution, all the Constitution, not just, well, I'm going to take an oath on this portion, but I'm going to throw away. You take it or you don't take it. So you take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and that's in there as enshrined as one of our rights. Now, that doesn't mean we can't do responsible, reasonable things to make sure we're safeguarded, which is why I had a great opportunity to meet with local superintendents to get their ideas about how to keep our kids safe, my kids included, and everybody else in the community. And quite honestly, was surprised by some of the things that they were requesting, which were not on what traditionally you might think they were requesting. A lot of them wanted more funding for counselors, but not your regular guidance counselor or something. They wanted counselors that could talk and would talk to the children about other issues, because apparently kids don't want to, for lack of a better way of phrasing this, rat out their friends, even if they're concerned about them, even if they've seen something that they're worried about. They don't want to tell on them. And they don't want to tell their teachers, and they don't want to tell their guidance counselor, but they'll tell somebody that's quasi official, but also quasi their friend. Other school districts wanted money for hardening of their entrances because the school's older and they can't control entry and exit very easily, and they don't have the money to do it. Other ones wanted resource officers, and what it kind of came down to is, yeah, they all need resources. I voted for that, but it's really a local decision made by the people in the town. Northern High School and Northern School District, where my children go to school, just made some decisions, and it was widely advertised and so on, and some people take objection to it, but that's why we hire smart people to gauge the situation, assess the risk, and try and find a way to live within the freedoms that we have, the Constitution that we have, and the kind of the oaths that we've all taken that are important to us and that we take very seriously.
Just to follow up on that, though, so what I heard you say there is that you kind of look at it more from like, let's provide some resources so schools can become safer, and let's maybe address mental health sides of things, right, with the counselors,
sure,
that sort of thing. But one essential question about this, though, is at this point, would you say that there are any gun control measures that you could be in support of, like, you know, universal background checks, or kind of the equivalent that we're hearing talk about now of like a, you know, you get a PFA for domestic violence abusers. You might get a gun order.
Yeah,
or something
right.
like that.
So
I mean, are you warming up to any of those ideas?
I remain results oriented, results interested, right? So if I'm going to do something, if we're going to do something, I think we have to ensure that it gets results, because quite often, almost any time we make a law or a rule, we're diminishing people's rights. So we got to be really, really careful with that. But one thing that has piqued my curiosity is this red flag. We've got a red flag bill that we're kind of looking into. I think it's not necessarily perfected yet, but if you do, for instance, the individual that attacked the school in Florida, the police or the authorities stop out at their residence, I think in upwards, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's above 35 times. 35 times. The police, other than sitting in my driveway because we've gotten threats, have never visited my house, right? But when the police are visiting your home 35 times, that's a red flag to somebody, And so I think that there's legislation. I think the gentleman's out of New York who has offered that. Our staff is going through it. We're very diligent in making sure that you know, it meets.
Agree with the administration's approach to restricting Title IX, the so-called Title IX gag rule?
I do.
Why?
I think it's important. This is a moral question for a lot of people, and who are also participating in their government, who don't have a choice otherwise. How the policy is directed, how their tax dollars are spent, and I think it's important that we acknowledge they are citizens in the United States as well, and their views need to be honored and heard and acted upon as well as everybody else's. So I think it's a reasonable balance with the circumstances as they are.
You don't worry that it's going to cut off services to a segment of the population who might not be able to access them otherwise?
Again, I've voted time and time again, and we have resourced time and time again federally qualified health centers that deal with the whole health of the person that's coming in, not just one segment. And I think it's a reasonable compromise with the circumstances, and offers the services that people are looking for, especially in underprivileged areas, or areas where people are struggling the most.
You're a veteran.
Indeed.
Or actually still a reservist, I guess, still
Yes,
serving.
sir.
We've now been in Afghanistan for going on almost 18 years.
Right.
What is the end game there? How do we know when we've won, and when we get to bring our soldiers home?
It's one of the things that remains a frustration for me. We can't allow terrorist or terrorist sponsoring states, or states that would unwittingly, maybe even unwillingly, harbor terrorist activities that are malign against the United States or the interest of the United States. However, I lament we continue to seem to throw money at this immature strategy. It's just ineffective. When I say immature, I just mean that, mature means that we're seeing gains every year by year, day by day, generally speaking, getting to where we want to get, which is out of there, and allowing Afghanistan govern itself. I'm not sure. To me, the end game is a safe, stable Afghanistan that's governing itself without the overwhelming burden and input of the United States, and particularly the United States military. I think we have to set hard benchmarks for the Afghan government and work towards them very diligently. And sometimes I think we lose focus of that, and hold them to that. I think it's easy to kind of miss the mark. I am concerned about negotiations with the Taliban, where they would be part of the governance, because I don't see them ever coming to terms with the United States and being a practical, reasonable allied actor with the United States, even one that maybe is adversarial, but you can live with. There are adversarial nations to the United States that we live with, but I think that they're always going to be interested in taking hostile action against us. So I'm frustrated with it, to be sure.
you've been an advocate for enhanced security along the southern border.
Indeed.
In terms of the broader discussion of immigration reform. Clock's about to run out in this Congress.
Yeah.
Is there, one, an opportunity in the next Congress for something that looks like immigration reform? First question. Second is, to what end is separating children from their families ensuring a safer border? How does that foster that?
Let's start with the second part first. No one. No, every one of us, we can't, first of all, as a parent, you can't imagine having your children taken away from you. It's just literally unimaginable. And then if you can project yourself into the mind and the heart and the eyes of a child, thinking about this child just made this really difficult journey. Who knows what perils they have traversed, and they're all alone in this new world, and the only person that they have any affiliation with is now gone. Don't speak the language. It's a horrific circumstance, and nobody wants to see that. At the same time, the federal government doesn't want to be complicit in child trafficking, and unfortunately, many of these children, and this is kind of where the information needs to get out there, because a lot of people don't know this. A vast majority of these children aren't with their parents when they get to the border. They're already with someone smuggling them, trafficking them. They're already with a coyote. They're not with their parents. And the United States government, of course, without any documentation, right? The child probably doesn't have any documentation, so they're with some adult. It's their responsibility, and it should be. Like, they show up on their doorstep, and you have to take responsibility for it. But how do they figure out who this child is? And then there's the whole thing where you have to abide. We have laws in this country, right? The current law is you can't keep someone who crossed criminally with their child for more than 20 days. You can't. It's against the law. So what do we do then? We send them somewhere where we don't know? I mean, it is an intractable position that begs for a solution immediately. And one of the things I lament is that the president had given the Congress a deadline, as you recall, regarding DACA, which was, I think, to be a catalyst to prompt action. Committees and individuals, including myself, got together and we started crafting legislation, only to see the courts thwarted in my opinion, the deadline by upholding what I see as a improper and I think to a certain extent illegal action by the previous administration, but they did that, which relieved the pressure. And then many of us, myself included, fought to have this legislation brought to the fore, because the problem is acute. It's happening right now on both sides, on all sides. And it came to an impasse, and I'm sure you folks know the kind of the inside deal with the discharge resolution and so on and so forth. And we were told, look, there's not the support for this bill. No one is helping this bill. Nobody in leadership on either side is doing anything to help this bill get to get passed. We don't have the votes for it. But the demand was from people like me is put the bill on the floor and let's show the American people who's going to vote, who will vote for a solution set. And they put it on the floor, and it got 195 votes, much to their surprise. Meanwhile, the bill that they had been working on got 121, and when folks like me literally said to our leadership, 195, we need, I think at the time, it was not 218 because we were missing some members, it was 214 to pass. So we're literally 20 votes away. Like, we can work towards something here. Like, everybody will give something. Let's get something passed. They said, no, issues off the table for session now, we're done, right? So do I think so now the second question, do I think something can be done in the next? Absolutely. We're 195 votes close. I mean, and we'd be derelict in our duty not to make an attempt at it.
The bill you're referring to,
Good Lat 1 is what it was
That's what people call it,
formally
yeah.
characterized, yeah.
Did you follow up?
Actually, it was going to veer off in a different direction.
Okay.
Can you just talk to us about your thoughts on the Kavanaugh hearing?
Sure. Look, it's there's a credible claim. These things have to be taken seriously. They have to be taken seriously. Every one of us has a mom. Most of us have a wife or daughters or someone we love that we don't want to see horrible things happen to, right? So absolutely, that has to be acknowledged I don't know if the right word is adjudicated, but there needs to be responsibility taken. We need to find the facts and make sure that the right thing is done. Let's put it like that. That having been said, I am concerned about the timing and the placement of it. It seems to me if you knew that information and you knew FBI background checks were going on and that could be a component of the background check, why wouldn't it be brought to light so that it can be a component of the background check that essentially is what you're asking for at the 11th hour here? And it concerns me in a whole host of ways, because as much as the claim of the gentlelady is important to be heard, the claim of Mr. Kavanaugh and his presumed innocence is a component here as well. And we, in our society, we're presumed innocent until proven guilty, and so we don't want to destroy his reputation without the facts to back up a claim. And so I think the whole thing just diminishes, quite honestly, the credibility of a very real subject that is gaining light and attention as it should, but also kind of makes a mockery of the nomination process, and that's unfortunate because this is important stuff for our country, and they need to have the trust that their government can do the right thing above board and do a good job at it. And it seems like it's just, I hate to say it, but a bit of a circus.
Well, to that point then, would you be in favor of the Senate Judiciary Committee taking its time, taking a couple of weeks to look into this, or do you think that the better course of progress is to meet on Monday and file through?
I think the Senate has been very gracious and said, we want to hear your claim, whether you come in, whether we do it in public, whether we do it in private, whether we come to you. We want to get to the facts. But what it can't be, and I think you all know this, what it can't be used as specifically and somewhat obviously as running out the clock on the important business. The Senate gets, in my opinion, not as much done as it is. The last thing I think we need to do is slow down, any progress out of the legislature. I mean, we have a hard enough time. We have 400 or 500 bills sitting on the Senate's doorstep. The last thing we need to do is grind the gears down. So I think they've offered reasonable alternatives. And let me say this as well. The FBI, this is not the place, really. I mean, these crimes, if it is a crime, they're investigated locally. That's why we have the police. And if there's a crime alleged here, which I assume there is, although it seems a little murky there exactly how it's characterized, but it should be, I think, probably, I don't know if it's the Montgomery County Police in Maryland, but the FBI does background checks. But this is not in the FBI's wheelhouse regardless, right? So the background check is, and if it's a component of that, it is.
In this context, this would be part of the background check.
Right.
I mean, sort of like an addendum to the background check.
Right.
Any other follow-ups on that? Because I have another different
Sure.
direction. I wanted to ask you, and context for this question, I mean, I've spent a lot of time more focused on the state legislature
Sure.
and things local than Washington. But when I see your name pop up in national news outlets, often it has to do with climate change, because you say some things to make a point, and people glom onto it.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you though, because it does. I mean, I think I'm honestly interested in your position on a couple of these things. So I'm going to ask you a three-part question.
Sure.
I'm going to read it. I'll read it back to you.
Oh yeah, I might need it if it's three-part. Yeah. Okay. All right.
3 parts. I wanted to. I feel like we and voters here are entitled to know, and maybe to cut through the confusion. Do you believe that we are in a period where human activity has exacerbated climate change? What is your level of concern about that, and what should be done about it from a government standpoint?
Can I parse the word a little bit, exacerbate, and say contribute to?
I think that's fine.
Okay. The climate's changing. Certainly, I think anybody would be foolish to not acknowledge that. And saying things like this, look, Again, I like to deal in the facts. I know they're stubborn. The place where we're sitting right now likely was underneath the Wisconsin ice sheet for 100,000 years. For 100, not 100 years, not 100,000 years. Obviously something happened before the course of human events to melt the ice sheet back and give us the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and all the surrounding states, right? So the climate is changing, without a doubt. I think we contribute to it. I don't know exactly how, and that becomes the rub, right? When you have the GAST, and you're familiar with the global area surface temperature data, when you have questions about that, and that's how we predicate all our policy, all our legislation, all our findings, all the modeling, when you have flaws in the GAST, in the surface temperature readings, it opens up an opportunity for skepticism. And I think it's right, because what we're talking about is the things we do impact people's lives, and we want to proceed based on the facts, not based on suppositions or the facts that we hope that we have. That having been said, well, I'm a guy that used an outhouse, right, and not a porta potty, an outhouse, right? We have done a whole lot, and we should do a whole lot to clean up our world. Every single one of us. We want to drink clean water. We want to breathe clean air. For the last, I think, the majority of the last 10 years, and particularly 2017, the United States has had the greatest reduction in CO2 emissions of all the countries. So we're doing a pretty good job. But we got to be careful about this balance and making sure that we're following the facts and making sure we have the correct facts. And the temperature surface data is something that, unfortunately, you can go back to, I think there are two studies that are peer-reviewed last year that show and that acknowledge that the global surface temperature readings are flawed, and we really can't use them as the basis for policy.
I want to ask about the clean water market. You took some flack about what you said about the problems in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
It wasn't your responsibility to clean it up, yet you have just said that it is our responsibility to have clean water.
Sure.
How do you reconcile those notions?
Well, it is our responsibility, but my issue kind of with Flint was that it was there were local bad decisions made. And to blame the rest of the country for not acknowledging or not wanting clean water seems to be the wrong answer to me. I mean, if local officials made decisions to imperil their citizenship, then that's where the responsibility and the accountability should lie. Now, can the federal government come in and absolutely help to clean it? Because they need clean water now, not like in 10 years when we get done with the trials. They need clean water now. We all do. So there's a place for the federal government and government in general to do those things. But you can't blame the rest of the country for particular problems that happen based on the decisions of individuals in authority to make those decisions.
Hey, just to roll back to the prior question.
Sure.
I mean, you've been in favor of some of the steps that the Trump administration has taken, right?
Right.
To block the greenhouse gas emissions that the Obama administration had imposed, and I think the methane rules. And
right.
those.
Right.
You're on board with that. So, I mean, is there anything that you think the government ought to be doing with regard to climate change right now?
Charlie, I think actually we can do all these things you're talking about. For me, oftentimes it's a process circumstance. So these aren't this isn't legislation. This is rulemaking, often based out of what you probably are aware of, sue and settle. So there's a rule that's made by bureaucrats, right? It's not your legislator making. It's not the person you voted for. They're making a rule. Some outside group sues over the rule. There becomes a settlement dictated by the court, which now becomes de facto law. And it has not been vetted. It's not gone through the committee process. There's not a scientific basis to it. It is an argument between two parties about the policy made by bureaucrats, and now it becomes the law that all of us have to live under, and there's almost zero accountability, and there's no way to change it. There's no way to change these things, even when they do things that are damaging to the economy or the population or what have you. So for me, it's really a process issue. I think there's a process we need to go through, and if we come to the same conclusions, then fine. But let's go through the process so that everybody's heard and all the facts are available to make the optimal decision.
Well, and I guess, but here's the thing, like where you are in that process.
Sure.
Again, just for clarity, I mean, you're one of the people who would say that your not sure how much human activity is contributing to the problem, so we should be careful about what we do, policy-wise.
Well, we should also always be careful about policy affects people's lives, and if you're not sure, look, we all go forward with incomplete information. That's to be sure on just about any single issue, including what I packed for my child's lunch today, right? But we have to, when you're impacting people's lives so greatly, you really have to be careful. I think measured steps are appropriate, almost in anything. The Founding Fathers set this government up to be somewhat, I don't know, lumbering along, right, so that we make sure that we see all the things that we can't see intuitively, so that we see them all, so that we don't make snap decisions based on our emotions, and that we get the policy right, because once policy is in place, as you know, it takes an act of Congress to change it.
Yeah, the only thing, like on this issue though, I mean, yeah, I read an article about, you know, just this summer about how in the late 70s and 80s, the world was pretty close to doing some things on greenhouse gases and global warming and so forth. So to use that argument, I mean, I think it could fairly be said that the process has been at play for decades on this issue.
Charlie,
there's a lot of people that are worried that we're kind of losing our window to act on the problem. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, there may be a valid position that says, well, look, I put my faith in new technologies that will help us out of the bind that we might be getting ourselves into and that sort of thing. And maybe that's a prevailing view for you. But anyway,
I think it's part of it. But
we had these things like the Paris Climate Accords that were rational steps to try to address that problem, and they're being erased one by one. And I'm just kind of curious about it. Does that mean that you just don't see it as a problem that government needs to stick its
I've never said that. I don't imply that I don't see it as a problem that government doesn't serve a part in. But again, I think we have to. The process is important, and getting it right is important. The Paris Climate Accord was, by all rights, a treaty, but it wasn't brought to the American people and their duly elected representatives as a treaty. That notwithstanding, the Paris Climate Accord in particular imperiled the United States and our economy while leaving China and India, arguably the greatest polluters on the planet for many years now, and it looks like they will be for many years in the future. We're letting them off the hook. So when you say we're missing our window, I just told you the United States had the greatest reduction in CO2 emissions of any country in 2017. Yet we're gonna imperil ourselves even further and let China and India just march forward and continue to. We're all living in the same atmosphere. To me, it seems the answer should be, with the weight of the United States, if we know how to do things and clean things up and use technology and stop building outhouses, that we can offer those things to these countries and help them as well as help ourselves.
I'm going to get for a minute here, if I can. You were among the congressional Republicans who sued over the new district lines that were proposed by the state Supreme Court. You fought that, you lost.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you're stuck with these voters. So
I don't know if that's your characterization, not mine.
I didn't sue.
But I didn't say I was stuck either.
Yes. But now that you have these folks, I'm wondering what it's been like getting out there in a district that is still Republican, not quite as Republican as it was before, and meeting some folks that you might not have had the opportunity to talk to or meet.
Quite honestly, it's very similar to every other time. Folks know, if the folks that know me know that I work hard at it, and I go out and see people. I'm a guy that literally, I'm the congressman, I'm ringing your doorbell, I'm knocking on your door. I've always done that. Quite honestly, I did it originally and initially because I'm a guy with zero resources, right? And the only way you can get your message out is to go put your face in front of people. And so it's just a new location. Again, I feel like most folks that I meet at their door are a lot the same as all of us. We have the same concerns. We want the same things for our lives, and they just want to see the person that they're going to consider to vote for and know that he's willing or she's willing to come out and put themselves in front. They know we're not going to agree on everything. My wife and I don't agree on everything, but we love each other and we stick it out together just like we do with our neighbors, and that just corresponds to your greater community. So quite honestly, it's been invigorating for me, and it's kind of just what I've always been on a continuum of doing.
How much longer are we going?
You have about 10 minutes.
Okay. I mean,
That's maybe one question.
well, yeah, no, I mean, I have a question that might be, I don't know, this is a softball. Coming right at you.
Not you, Charlie.
No, this is very much a softball. I did want to ask you, because I just think it's fair to give you a chance to say this. Again, from the perspective of somebody who hasn't paid a lot of careful attention to what's going on in Washington with our delegation because of other pressing matters here. When you're out there meeting voters and selling yourself for re-election this year, when you look back on your 6 years in Congress, what gives you the most satisfaction about, hey, I feel good about the fact that I've been able to contribute this or accomplish this? What are the bullet points that you're most proud of?
So I'll give you the macro and the micro. So the macro is that every day I get up, I look in the mirror, I think about my kids, my wife, my mom, Social Security, Medicare. She's paid her whole life, struggling to earn to have those things. My kids' future, and all the kids and families and senior citizens and veterans that I meet throughout the day, the year, what have you. I think about all those things, and that I've stood for something, and I've told them. I didn't say, well, it's kind of in the middle, it's complicated, you don't understand, it's, I've stood for something, and take the hits whether people agreed or not. And I think that at least, even if we disagreed, most people will respect the fact that I'm willing to fight for the things that I believe in. So that's kind of the macro. The micro is that even though most people don't know this because of oftentimes how you're characterized out of Washington, D.C. or by your detractors, and I've been privileged in this legislative session, in this year and a half, year and 3/4 now, I passed 10 pieces of legislation, separate bills or amendments, bipartisan, almost fully bipartisan for the vast majority of them, 2 signed into law. I think that's, look, I mean, we all have to gauge our productivity, our production, our success by something, but I think that's, look, I mean, that's what I'm supposed to do, so I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I mean, I feel like I'm being effective, I'm getting something accomplished, I don't win everything, I don't get it my way all the time. That's okay, that's what democracy and a representative republic is all about. But you fight for your position, and you find a way to get to yes, as long as you can get something for your constituency and something for your country that you believe in and that they believe in.
What are your opponent's weak points?
I really don't want to talk about that's his job to talk about. I'm running for this position, but I would say this. Some people are saying, well, you're not very moderate, and your opponent seems moderate. My opponent has taken on the Bernie Sanders platform. He burned a gun on national TV for the federal takeover of all of healthcare and education. Those to me don't seem like moderate positions. A guy that gets 10 bills or pieces of legislation passed with bipartisan support in a year and 3/4 time, I think is probably somewhat effective. Even though you might not hear about those things, that's the reality. And so, again, I'm running for the position, and I go out and sell my apples, and that's what I do, and I put it in the voters' hands and the good Lord's hands, and that's where it's going to be.
Got a couple of reader questions on this one. You said on the Tucker Carlson show last year that you had credible evidence that ISIS was involved in the Vegas shooting. What was it? And have you turned that over to somebody if you had it?
I don't have to turn it over because I got it from the government in the secure compartmentalized information facility, otherwise known as a SCIF, where you get classified information. And as a citizen who has been privileged to have a top secret security clearance before I went to Congress due to my service in the military, and then of course one in the Congress, I'm privy to those things. So I got the briefing, which is in my opinion very different from what you're hearing on open source media, and I felt compelled to let the country know and to urge action on the entities that would take action in that regard. So while I'd love to tell you or have you see the briefing, I'd love all my constituents in the world to see the briefing. It's a classified circumstances, especially due to sources and methods, and I can't divulge any more than that.
speaking of that, do you agree with Representative Nunez's push to declassify?
Absolutely.
Why? I mean, you're talking about the exact same thing. You're talking about potentially compromising sources and methods.
No, we're not talking about. So I didn't compromise sources and methods, and we're not talking about
This document does have the potential to do that, though.
No, when we make plain and sunlight this information, the sources and methods, or the information that was gleaned from certain sources and methods, will be redacted or removed, so we can't see them, because that's how the sources and methods are divulged, right? So what we're talking about is sunlighting or making transparent all this information, except for the things that would reveal sources and methods. This information belongs to the American people, not the Department of Justice, not to the FBI. This belongs to the American people, and when there is suspicion of criminal activity or certainly unethical activity, such at the level that it has allegedly occurred, the only way we're ever going to know and have any trust in the agencies in question here is to see this and make our own judgment. So nobody's talking about divulging sources or methods or breaching national security. But I would also say this. While this has been the claim of the detractors the whole way along the line of this thing, right? Every single time we've asked for one thing or another, no, you're going to breach national security and you're going to divulge sources and methods. Every single time the information came out subsequent to that claim, at no time have sources and methods been compromised or national security been breached. So there's a track record of crying wolf, which just rings hollow. So let's get to it.
I think I just heard you say that. Did you just agree with the President's contention that there was corruption of some kind at the FBI? It's an extraordinary allegation.
It is an extraordinary allegation, but...
So do you agree? Do you believe it?
I can't believe it without seeing the facts. That's why we want to see the facts, but I certainly think there's a strong suspicion.
What leads you to believe that?
Everything I've seen so far. Everything I've seen so far leads me to believe that.
Veteran, how did you feel about the somewhat eroded relationship between Senator McCain and President Trump?
It's unfortunate, and it's disappointing. We all have differences of opinion, regardless of party, regardless of where we live in service, and so on and so forth. It's disappointing that it became public, and because each are such towering figures in their own right. And I just personally think. Look, people disagree with me all day long, all the time, right? And some people agree with me all day long, all the time. I think as an elected official, as quasi-leaders in your community, whether you're a township supervisor or whether you're a United States Senator or what have you, we have at least some duty to set an example, to be an example, and to show our better side, even though we might have personal differences. That's not always easy to do. But we got to endeavor to. We have to endeavor to do that. We all fall short. I have fallen short, and I'm sure you've seen that on occasion. And we all have our buttons that get pushed. But we have to work at that every day. And to see it as quite honestly, it's disappointing, but it's human. It's human, and we see it in our own neighborhoods. We see it in our own families. It's disappointing there as well.
North Carolina digging out now. From Storm Florence.
Horrendous. Yeah.
$10 million diverted from FEMA to.
That's not my understanding. That's
your understanding?
That's not my understanding. My understanding that claim is patently false. So I'm just going to reject it. And I'm on the Homeland Security Committee and questioned that. We were told that that's patently false. So that's the last credible information I have. And I got that from the administration. And as a guy, as you know, John, but maybe you don't know, as a guy who grew up along the Yellow Breaches, flooded out the whole house twice, no help from anybody, couldn't afford flood insurance, so you just suck it up and find a way. But it's an awful circumstance, and we had it right here in the 4th District just earlier. It might have been just earlier this month. The days are kind of passive. I think it was, down in the Muddy Forks Creek. Right. Total house is completely gone. Completely gone. Yep, it's a terrible circumstance. The one gentleman went out for a sandwich with his dog, and he came back, and his house was completely gone. These are real things that happen to people, and we need to pay attention to them. But I would also say there's got to be a better solution than chasing after it, which is what we keep on doing.
Last one.
I'm actually covered what I was going to say.
Anyone else? Going once?
How does your reconfigured district compare to the old one?
Well, I cross the river a lot more than I used to. It's similar in a way. You know, there's urban, suburban, and rural. There's differences of opinion in all those three places. So you got to go out and have an open mind to everybody you see. And sometimes trying to assuage these folks are going to anger these folks. I think the important thing is, just like I've always done, I've been present. I'm respectful. I listen to their concerns. I can't always agree with them, but I understand they're real for them.
Real quickly, I'm going to stick on the one end.
Sure.
The top three concerns you're hearing?
Well, the top three, I would say healthcare still remains a great concern. I think that, believe it or not, there's a lot of animosity about the animosity. And kind of community safety, which is generally broad. It not only includes school safety, but safety for the country internationally and with the threats that are out there, whether they're North Korea, Iran, China, etc. Those seem to be three big things that are on people's minds every day. But that doesn't eclipse the fact that they're still concerned about paying the bills. They're happy that that their paychecks are going up and that they have more opportunity. And I've heard that a lot of places. Literally, people have come up and hugged me, or when I've come to their door for the tax relief, and so that's been invigorating to me.
All right, Scott Perry, thanks very much.
Thank you for your time.